Hello there, children. Mr. Conway here, and I'm going to be continuing to read Enid Blyton's Secret 7. I'm going to be reading chapters 5 and 6 today, but previously on the Secret 7, Jack went home after building his snowman with the other children and realised his Secret 7 badge button had fallen off. So later that night he snuck out the house, went to the field and found his badge. But in doing so, he met two mysterious men and heard a mysterious, scary sound. So he ran back and thought to himself he would needed to tell the Secret 7 first thing in the morning. Chapter 5. Exciting Plans. Now the next morning, Janet went down to the shed by herself. Peter was brushing Scamper. He was well and truly brushed every single morning, so it was no wonder his coat shone so beautifully. Just open the shed and give it an airing, ordered Peter. We shan't be using it today. There won't be any meeting yet. Janet skipped down the path, humming. She took the key from its hiding place, a little ledge beneath the roof of the shed, and slipped it into the lock. She opened the door. The shed smelt rather stuffy. She left the door open and went to open the little window too. When she turned round, she saw Jack's note on the floor. At first, she thought it was an old piece of waste paper, and she picked it up and crumpled it, meaning to throw it away. Then she caught the sight of a word on the outside of the folded paper. Urgent. Very important. Indeed. She was astonished. She opened the paper out and glanced down at it. Her mouth fell open in amazement. She raced out of the shed at top speed, yelling for Peter. Peter! Peter! Where are you? Something's happened. Quick! Her mother heard her and called to her. Janet! Janet! What's the matter, dear? What's happened? Oh, nothing, Mummy, called back Janet, suddenly remembering that this was a secret society business. Well, why are you searching for Peter like that? Said her mother. You made me jump. Janet flew up the stairs to where Peter was still brushing Scamper. Peter, didn't you hear me call? I tell you, something's happened. Well, what is it? Asked Peter, surprised. Look, I found this paper when I went to the shed this morning, said Janet, and she gave him Jack's note. It's marked urgent, very important indeed. Look what it says inside. Peter read out loud what Jack had written. Peter, call a meeting of the Secret 7 at once. Very important mystery to solve. It happened to me last night about 9:30. Get the others together at 10 if you can. I'll be there. Jack. What on earth does he mean? Said Peter in wonder. Something happened to him last night. Well, why is it such a mystery then? I expect he's exaggerating. He's not. I'm sure he's not, cried Janet, dancing from one foot to another in her excitement. Jack doesn't exaggerate. You know he doesn't. Shall I go and tell the others to come at 10 if they can? Peter, it's exciting. It's a mystery. You wait and see what the mystery is before you get all worked up, said Peter, who, however, was beginning to feel rather thrilled himself. I'll go and tell Colin and George. You can tell the girls. Janet sped off in one direction and Peter in another. How lovely to call a meeting already. And about something so exciting too. It was about 9:30 when the two came back. Everyone had promised to come. They were all very anxious to know what Jack had got to say. Remember your badges, Janet said to the two girls. You won't be admitted to an important meeting like this unless you know the password and have your badge. Everyone turned up early, eager to hear the news. Everyone remembered the password too. Weekdays. And the door was opened and shut. Weekdays. And once more the door was opened and shut. Member after member passed in, wearing the badge and murmuring the password. Both Colin and George had their badges this morning. George had found his, and Colin's mother had already made him one. Jack was the last of all to arrive, which was most annoying, because everyone was dying to hear what he had to say. But he came at last. Weekdays, he said, his voice softly, outside the shed, and it opened. It opened and he went in. Everybody looked at him expectantly. We got your note and warned all the members to attend this meeting, said Peter. What's up, Jack? Is it really important? Well, you listen and see, said Jack, and he sat down on the box left empty just for him. It happened last night. He began to tell his story, how he had missed his badge and felt certain he had dropped it in the field where the snowmen were, how he had slipped out with his torch to find it, and what he had heard and seen from the field. That frightful noise, the snorting and the horrid squeal, he said. It nearly made my hair stand on end. Why did those men come down that lane late at night? It didn't lead anywhere. It stopped until further on, just by a great holly hedge. And what could that thing be that they were towing behind? Was it a cage or something? Or was it a closed van where somebody was being kept a prisoner? Said Barbara in a half whisper. It wasn't a cage as far as I could see, said Jack. I couldn't even see any windows to it. It was more like a small removal van than anything else. But whatever was inside wasn't furniture, I tell you. It snorted and squealed and struggled. Was it a man inside, do you think? Asked Pam, her eyes wide with interest and excitement. No, I don't think so. It might have been, of course, said Jack, but a man doesn't snort like that, unless he had a gag over his mouth, perhaps. This was a new thought, and rather an alarming one. Nobody spoke for a minute. Well, said Jack at last, it certainly is something for the Secret Seven to look into. There's no doubt about that. It's all very mysterious indeed. How are we going to tackle it? Said George. They all sat and thought. We had better find out if we can tell anything by the tracks in the snow, said Peter. We'll find out too if there are car tracks up the drive to that old house. Oh, yes, and we could ask the old caretaker if he heard anything last night, said Colin. Bagsy, I don't do that, said Pam at once. I'd hate to go and ask him questions. Well, somebody's got to, said George. It might be important. And we might try and find out who owns the old empty house, said Colin. Oh, yes, said Peter. Well, let's split up the inquiries. Pam, you go with George and see if you can find out who owns the house. Well, how do we find out? Asked Pam. You'll have to use your common sense, said Peter. I can't decide everything. Janet, you and Barbara can go down the lane and examine it for car tracks and anything else you can think of. Right, said Janet. Glad that she didn't have to ask questions to the caretaker. Colin, Jack and I will go into the drive of the old house and see if we can get the caretaker to tell us anything, said Peter, feeling rather important as he made all of these arrangements. What's Scamper to do? Asked Janet. He's going to come with us, said Peter, in case the caretaker turns nasty. Old Scamper can turn nasty too, if he has to. Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Take Scamper, that is, agreed Jack, relieved at the thought of having the dog with him. Well, shall we set off? Yes. Meet and report here this afternoon, said Peter. You've discovered a most exciting mystery, Jack, and it's up to the Secret Seven to solve it as soon as they can. Chapter 6. Finding out new things. All the Secret Seven set off at once, feeling extremely important. Scamper went with Peter, Colin and Jack, his tail well up, and he also felt very important. He was mixed up in a mystery with the society. No wonder he turned up his nose at every dog that he met. They left Pam and George at the corner, looking rather worried. The two looked at one another. How are we going to find out who owns the house? Said Pam. Ask the post office, said George, feeling that he really had got a very bright idea. Surely, if the house is owned by someone who has put in a caretaker, there must be letters going there. Good idea, said Pam, and they went off to the post office. They were lucky enough to see a postman. Emptying the letters from the letterbox outside, George nudged Pam. Come on, we'll ask him. They went up to the man. Excuse me, said George, could you tell us who lives at the old house down by the stream? You know, the empty house, there. How can anyone live in an empty house? Said the postman. Don't ask silly questions and waste my time. You children, you think you're so funny, don't you? Well, we didn't mean to be funny or cheeky either, said Pam in a hurry. What George means is, who owns the house? There's a caretaker there, we know. We just wondered who the house belongs to. Why, thinking of buying it? Said the postman, and laughed at his own joke. The children laughed too, wishing the man would answer their question. Well, how would I know who owns the place? He said, emptying the last of the letters into his sack. I never take letters there, except to old Dan, the caretaker, and he only gets once each month. His wages, maybe. Better ask the estate agents over there. They deal with houses, and they might know the owner, seeing as you're so anxious to find him. Oh, thank you, said Pam, joyfully, and the two of them hurried across to the estate agents. Oh, we might have thought to go and ask them ourselves, said Pam, but I say, what shall we say if the man here asks why we want to know? You can only go to an estate agent if you want to buy or sell a house, don't you? They peeped in at the door. A boy of about 15 sat at a table there, addressing some envelopes. He didn't look very frightening. Perhaps he would know and wouldn't ask them why they wanted the name of the owner. They went boldly in. The boy looked up. "What do you want?" he said. "We've been told to ask who owns the old house down by the stream," said George, hoping the boy might think that some grown-up had sent him to find out. Actually, it was only Peter, of course, but he didn't need to know that, did he? "I don't think the house is on the market," said the boy, turning over the pages of a book. "Do your parents want to buy it or something? I don't know if it's up to be sold." The two children said nothing, because they didn't really know what to say. The boy went on turning over the pages. "Ah, yes, here we are," he said. "It's not for sale. It was sold to Mr. J. Hollycoff some time ago. Don't know why he doesn't live in it, though, I'm sure." "Does Mr. Hollycoff live anywhere here?" asked Pam. "No. His address is 64 Haycombe Street, Covilty," said the boy, reading it out. "Course, I don't know if he lives there now. Do your people want to get in touch with him? I can find out this address now, if you'd like. He's on the telephone at this address." "Oh, no, thank you," said George hastily. "We don't want to know anything more, as the house is, not for sale. Thank you very much. Good morning to you." They went out, rather red in the face, but very pleased with themselves. "Mr. Hollycoff," said Pam to George. "It's a peculiar name, isn't it? Do you remember his address, George?" "Yes," said George. He took out his notebook and wrote in it, "Mr. J. Hollycoff, 64 Haycombe Street, Covilty. Well, we've done our part of the job. I wonder how the others are getting on." They were getting on quite well. Janet and Barbara were busy examining the tracks down the lane that led to the stream. They felt quite like detectives. "See? The car with the van behind, or whatever it was, turned into the lane from the direction of Templeton. It didn't come from our village," said Janet. "You can see quite clearly where the wheels almost went into the ditch." "Yes," said Barbara, staring at them. "The tracks of the van wheels are narrower than the wheels of the car that towed it, Janet. And look! Just here in the snow you can see exactly what the pattern was on the wheels of the van. Not of the car, though. They're all blurred." "Don't you think it would be a good idea to take a note of the pattern of the tyre?" said Janet. "I mean, it might come in useful, and we could measure the width of the tyre print too." "Well, I don't see how those things can possibly matter," said Barbara, who wanted to go down the lane and join the three boys. "Well, I'm going to try and copy the pattern," said Janet firmly. "I like to have something to show to the boys." So, very carefully, she drew the pattern in her notebook. It was a very funny pattern, with lines and circles and V-shaped marks. It didn't really look like a very good drawing when she had done it. She had measured the print as best she could. She had no tape measure with her, so she had placed a sheet from her notebook over the track and had marked on it the exact size. She felt rather pleased with herself, but she did wish she had drawn the pattern better. Barbara laughed when she saw it. "Goodness, what a mess," she said. Janet looked cross and shut her notebook. "Let's follow the tracks down the lane now," she said. "We'll see exactly where they go. Not many vans coming down here. We ought to be able to follow the tracks easily." And she was quite right. It was very easy to follow them. They went on and on down the lane, and then stopped outside the old house. There was such a lot of all kinds of marks there that it was difficult to see exactly what they were. Footprints, tyre marks, places where the snow had been kicked and ruffled up. Oh, it was hard to tell anything except that this was where people had got out, and perhaps had some kind of struggle. "Look, the tyre marks leave all this mess and go down the lane," said Janet. She looked over the gate longingly. Were the boys in the old house with the caretaker? "Well, let's go and see if we can find the boys," said Barbara. "No, we haven't quite finished our job yet," said Janet. "We ought to follow the tracks as far as they go. Come on. We'll see if they go as far as the stream. There are two lots of tracks all down the lane, as we saw, so it's clear that the car and trailer went down and then back up again. We'll find out where they turned." Well, that was easy. The tracks went down to a field gate almost to the stream. Someone had opened the gate and a car had gone in with the trailer and had made a circle there, come out of the gate again and returned up the lane. It was all written clearly in the tyre tracks. Well, that's the story of last night, said Janet, pleased at her discoveries. The car and the thing it was pulling came from the direction of Templeton, turned down into this lane, stopped outside the old house, where people got out and messed around. Then it went down to the field. Someone opened the gate. The car and trailer went in and turned and came out again and went up the lane and disappeared into the night. Who or what it brought in the trailer van, goodness knows. Funny thing to do in the middle of the night, said Barbara. Very odd, agreed Janet. Now, let's go back to the old house and wait for the boys. It's almost 1 o'clock, said Barbara. Do you think they're still there? They hung over the gate and watched and listened. To their horror, the old caretaker came rushing out as soon as he saw them, with his big stick in his hand. More of you, he cried. You wait till I get you. You feel my stick all right, pestering, interfering children. You just wait. But Barbara and Janet didn't wait. They fled up the lane in fright as fast as they could possibly go in the soft, thick snow. So that is the end of Chapter 6 of Enid Blyton's The Secret Seven. I really hope you enjoyed that, and the mystery will continue next time. Goodbye, ye fives!